Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer for this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. This is your weekly forecast for the week of July 21st, 2025. And yes, there is that Leo new moon happening this week on the 24th, and I will make a separate video for that. Um, because I want to give it the depth that it deserves, as I do with all new and full moon videos. But I do want to say that this week is really picking up the energies of two things from the past. One is that Aries solar eclipse that happened on March 29th of this year, because Mars, the reason why I say this is Mars is now in a new phase to the South Node. Yesterday, on the 20th, it was in the perfection of its balsamic conjunction with that lunar South Node in Virgo. And to me, that was really indicative of wrapping up a 19-year cycle um, around improving and purging and healing, especially on a desire level, okay, archetypally. And the reason why I say this is that right after, you know, well, during this time period, we also had Mars retrograde. And so Mars hasn't really moved that much since, that eclipse. It retrograded from Leo back into Cancer, and then it direct motion went back into Leo, and we had then on April 26th of this year the Mars-Pluto conjunction, the Mars-Pluto opposition. Okay. And then after that, it entered into the sign of Virgo. Um, and now it is passed over that lunar south node in a new phase conjunction. So, what this is really reflecting is that the lessons that we have been learning about our choices, choice making really is a Martian dynamic because choices amount to desire. Everything amounts to desire. If you desire to do something, you take an action. And sometimes the action on acting upon a desire, something that you want to do on a soul level, that can either be going after it or it can also be making that choice of non-action, deciding I'm not going to do this, right? So there have been a lot of lessons that have culminated around our choice making pertaining to what it is that we've been needing to heal, what it is we've been needing to improve, what it is we've been needing to purge, where we felt inferior or superior, or where we have felt um, crisis in our life and the choices that we made pertaining to those crises, the parts in which we played, the roles we played within it, and really learning how to not be a victim of our own circumstances, right? And simply to not be a victim of our circumstances is really looking at things on an evolutionary level. That we all have a choice when we reincarnate, we come into this lifetime, and there are some things that are fated, and then there are some things that are free will, right? And we choose to work on certain bottom line soul dynamics. That is what your actual natal chart is speaking to, what the dynamics are you're working on. And how this comes up is through our desire nature. And when we have a dynamic of crisis, Virgo, it is very easy to get into that Virgoan victimized mentality. If only they would have done this, or, you know, why did this happen to me? This isn't my fault. Now, I don't want to victim blame because there are some things that we absolutely can be a victim of, but there's also instances when crisis happens in our life that it's very hard for us to understand sometimes the roles in which we play, the choices that led to that situation. You all who've subscribed to this channel know that I utilize a lot of personal stories because one, I want to humanize myself. Two, I feel like it helps. And three, I have these notes in my own natal chart. But even whenever the notes aren't in these signs, I just feel like there is something that is when we are able to be vulnerable and talk about what has happened in our lives, it gives space and room for other people to be vulnerable as well. So, for me, just to really help you all understand what I mean by understanding our parts and our choices whenever crisis happens, because this is something that's really been wanting to be dissolved, right, within our consciousness at this moment in time. I have a fly flying around in here. It's a big one too. Anyway, uh, we can really get trapped in this kind of victimized mentality. So for me, the first relationship that I really had that had a lasting impact on me, that was a romantic relationship. And I really want to get into this too because of the Venus square to the nodes that's going on, which I'll get into it in a second. But when I was younger, I met someone whenever I was 18. I've talked about it before on here. And I ended up getting pregnant at 19 by this person. And this person ended up, um, I was in a domestic violence situation. This person had abused me sexually, emotionally, mentally, physically, had the cops called, had investigations done, had a victim protection order, was trying to keep my child safe, um, and then was stalked for 5 years. And then he ended up um, murdering someone else after attempting to murder me. And there was lots of things in between. There's so much more to this, but I want to give you a gist of this. And the whole time I went through this, people didn't believe me. I didn't feel heard. It took him literally murdering someone else for people to finally believe me. And I felt like such a victim. I felt stuck in this mindset. And I was so disillusioned and so confused because I still loved this person and I just wished he was different and la 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 la. And I did not want to see my part. And my part, and this is so important for all of us to remember right now, because Saturn is conjunct Neptune. Neptune is the ruler of that north node, and now Mars is in a new phase conjunction to the south node. So it is wanting what this is saying is this can bring up old dynamics in order for us to have the Saturnian self-determination to make different choices than we did before. And that takes a conscious effort. And that conscious effort is that we need to be self-determined through self-reflecting and taking accountability. What was my part? What were the Mars choices I made that led to these situations in my life? For me, when I look back, when I met this person, I instinctually, Mars, was repelled and I did not listen. And because I lacked so much self-esteem, the more he was determined to entrap me, the more I thought he was amazing and I had gotten it wrong. And I learned that I was right. And so there was a lesson in empowering myself through listening to myself and my instincts and what it was that I was intuiting and feeling and sensing and not denying that. Virgo, denial. And what that also helped me do was to cultivate wisdom around having discernment around these areas in my life. But my choices of not listening to myself and abandoning myself and betraying myself led to that situation. Now, it was a very extreme situation, and that is because I was trying to wrap something up on a soul level. Okay. So it's really important during this time period, as things come up for you, that there is a resolution in being self determined to liberate from any type of victimization, and also to not feel guilt when there is anger around an injustice or something wrong that happened. We don't want to flip to the other side and just take full accountability. It's about taking accountability for what were your choices. What did you deny, Virgo? What did you not listen to from within? Venus. Venus squared the nodes this week. What Where did you not take the action that you knew that you should have? And what were the lessons that you learned through the crisis and the disillusionment? And maybe you're someone who's going through this now. And my whole point about this is to not beat yourself up. We know when we know, and we change when that awareness comes in. But it takes that self-determination of self-reflection and accountability in order to have the healing that the soul is desiring, in order to surrender, in order to release. So that Neptune Saturn conjunction and Aries retrograde, both ruled by this Mars, who's now in a new phase to the south node, is really about this reviewing of these dynamics, whatever they are, that has come up in your life, as a way to, you know, there can be these opportunities where a similar dynamic comes up, or and maybe it's not as bold, right? Or it's not as neon lights flashing, but it's more of honoring what you're sensing, um, because it can be like the Saturnian soul test of self-determination to not be who you were. Because every step that you take towards growth and your own evolution helps to purge the past dynamics, dealing with structure, disillusionment, denial, crisis, um, victimization. And it's really good to honor your anger, but to use it in a constructive and responsible and empowering way, right? That's part of the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries ruled by this Mars, is how can you utilize through honoring what your pure emotions are, even if they are anger, that's okay. But how can you use that constructively? What I did in the past is I decided to change a law in Oklahoma whenever I lived there around um, parental rights for people who had children with someone who ended up in the prison system. And I spoke for the YWCA and for United Way, and that desire exhausted itself. I don't really feel the need to do that now. Occasionally, I will speak about these things, and occasionally, I get women who are in these situations who come to me, and I always feel very honored because I know how isolating and confusing those situations can be. But I utilized my anger in a constructive and a responsible way that really was about this self-empowerment, right? Um, and I utilized my voice. This was also during a Mercury in Leo transit that I was having at this time whenever I decided to do that. Because I was trying to empower myself through my voice. All right. So there's this dynamic. And the other dynamic this week that I really want to speak to, because not only is Mars now in this new phase conjunction with the lunar south node, so it's again, I want to hammer this in. This is about making new choices around improvement and healing of prior emotional issues, of past emotional issues where there was wounding around inferiority, superiority, guilt, shame, judgment, um, masochism, sadism, um, around the crisis and the trauma, and choosing not, making a new choice to not repeat these same cycles, right? Because it's about improving, and you can't improve if you continue to make the same choice. All right. There is a different action that is necessary, that is meant to be taken. Mars, new phase conjunction to that lunar south node. All right. This is also where it is ruled by Mercury retrograde in the sign of Leo, where we are called to do this with love and empowerment, self-empowerment. All right. But it's discerning what is the correct action to take of expression. Where is it that I am needing to liberate from this thinking and reviewing it that has perpetuated these cycles, or how I feel about myself, or how I enter into relationships with others? It is really about cultivating a sense of creativity, of self-actualization in a loving way. The other dynamic that could be coming up is this is just a creative time. There could be these creative endeavors that are you're revisiting that you didn't do in the past. And now there's these ideas reemerging into your mind, Mercury, Uranus, and we are called to make a new action, to act on a desire, and to empower ourselves through that and have a co-creative process in that endeavor in whatever way that that looks for you. Okay? So before I get, actually, what I'll do is I'm going to share this chart for the Venus squaring the nodal axis. Okay? So here we have Venus at 19 degrees. By the way, conjunct the north node of Mars and Uranus here, which is very interesting. And it is square the nodes. The resolution is the north node. All right. And the ruler of this north node is Neptune retrograde, which is conjunct Saturn, both in Aries, ruled by this Uranus. So, what is this saying? All right. This is really reflective and indicative because remember, Venus and Mars and the South Node are ruled by this Mercury retrograde. This is reflecting this crossroads for each one of us to heal our inner relationship to self. And that healing is really happening through making new choices around how we relate to ourselves and others through dissolving old mental thought forms, Gemini, and purging those dynamics and making new choices that are in alignment with our own authenticity, not the conditioned soul, but the deconditioned soul, right? And Saturn conjunct Neptune, both in Aries retrograde, it's having us revisit these dynamics of what action is meant to be taken that feels authentic. What am I sensing? What feels true for me? Where do I feel freedom and independence? Um, and how do I continue to cultivate that in order to liberate from the past? In order to literally, Aries, Mars, new phase conjunction to the South Node, to leave the past behind, to cultivate a new, brand new evolutionary cycle of how it is that I relate to myself and relate to others in a compassionate Pisces, empathetic Pisces, healing Pisces way that also speaks to having courage and a dynamic of integration of oneself. It's like putting yourself out there in a new way that is not duplicitous. Gemini can be the shadow part, but is actually aligning with how it is you feel. So the actions are matching with the internal. And the more actions that you take around your inner relationship and your outer relationships helps to have a deeper sense of personal individuality and authenticity integrated within. And it's also helping to culminate North Node in Pisces, these prior dynamics of feeling or experiencing disillusionment or loss or guilt or shame around being you. And so it's about expressing yourself in a way that is empowered and in love, Mercury, in Leo, retrograde. It's about this creativity of self actualization that helps to continue to culminate the past ways of relating and also learning new ways of relating through expressing the authenticity. So, with Venus also conjunct the North Node of Mars and Uranus, it really hammers that in that individuality and choices are of utmost importance. And to do things, to create the actions and making the choices on a desire level, there's a dualistic nature around this, right? It's also where it's like there can be a crisis in action. I feel scared to make this choice because it's the unknown. It's the freedom and the liberation. And I'm afraid of what that is going to feel like. It could be inducing insecurity because I've never done this before. Um, so the duality of the Gemini component is really just it's like putting this emphasis on really using the wisdom from the past to discern the correct action, the correct choice. And the kicker is if it is rooted in sincerity and authenticity, you cannot go wrong. It's about keeping hope and faith in your endeavors and understanding that when we do things sincerely, with the intention of compassion and love and kindness and empathy, that that propels us along, that we don't have to be or show up the way that others want us to be, right? Or they're expecting us to be. We can just show up as we are. And that creates the liberation at hand. And so, what we don't want to do is to swing back into crisis mode, Virgo, or victimization mode, or inaction, or denying of reality, Virgo. We're wanting to really make the choice to strengthen that inner relationship to self and to further develop and grow and evolve and mature and individuate through using that wisdom to make a correct choice. And that correct choice leads us on the path of liberation. The other thing that I really want to say about these energies this week is that Jupiter has also entered into a wide trine with the lunar north node, okay? Jupiter is in Cancer. It's going to be ruled by this new moon in Leo on the 26th here in a couple of days. But this trine is one that can help us gain clarity um, around what action is meant to be taken in order to expand upon our own emotional um, authenticity and our own security and inner validation. And it's rooted in the truth, right? It's rooted in what our gut and what our intuition is speaking to us, right? This is part of that trine with Venus square the nodes and everything I've been talking about. It's really diving into expanding upon how you can feel secure within yourself and how that is healing the Piscean dynamic through cultivating and taking the correct course of action that you intuitively feel on a gut level, Cancer. Um, that will guide the way. If choices are coming up and there's like this confusion and I'm afraid to act and like, what is this going to look like? And, you know, you're not going to know unless you take a different course of action. And there is a lot of inner security that happens when we can feel like our own authority in life through discerning the correct action to continue to fortify and strengthen our inner relationship to self on a soul level. And that is really about trusting yourself. Distrust of self comes from conditioning of not feeling like an authority of our lives or waiting for someone else to do something because we have been conditioned to give that authority over to someone else. This is about you making the choice that feels correct for you. This could even be as simple as, well, I say simple. Another dynamic can be around your own health or someone in your life's health. It's Venus, it's Virgo, it's Pisces. It's like, what is your gut telling you? What is your intuition telling you? Maybe you've been sitting on the fence about something that could be healing and you're afraid to trust yourself and your instinct and your gut because other people are telling you that you're wrong, um, you're crazy, there's nothing here, or this, that, or the other. It's really like, how do you empower yourself to make that choice? And it comes through the intuition and the gut. I really want to hammer that home. The other thing that I really want to speak to is that within all of these transits, we still have Uranus and Gemini, right? That's another big theme. And it is trine Pluto in Aquarius, meaning that Pluto is ruled by this Uranus. Uranus in Gemini has the dual nature. It's ruled by this Mercury retrograde in Leo. There is so much that can come up, and this trine from Uranus to Pluto really denotes this clarity. I've been talking about this for the past couple of weeks. The other thing that I want to say about this is that, and I didn't touch on this the other week, and my apologies, but I feel like it's so pertinent, especially with this Mars new phase conjunction with the South Node and Venus squaring the nodal axis, is that when we remember that the resolution to Venus in that square to the nodal axis is that North Node in Pisces. It's around making new choices, around our own healing and dissolving and surrendering of from the past. And within our consciousness, it's about, I think of it as creating new neural pathways, right? Um, in order to strengthen the ways in which we relate to ourselves, our inner relationship. And through that, we're also having the past come back up, Mars new phase to the South Node, in order to give us a new opportunity to creatively self-actualize. Mercury and Leo ruling all of this, to make those new choices that are rooted more in self-love and how we can truly co-create with source or with community, with others, through this healing dynamic of purging the past mental thought processes that keep us contained and locked in a structure of conditioning that has nothing to do with who we naturally are, our actual soul natures. But this Uranus trining Pluto, and Uranus being ruled by Mercury retrograde is really big. It helps the clarity, but the thing is that Uranus, what it does is archetypally, it is about what Saturn has been suppressing within us, right? We through our conditioning, and it's wanting us to break free of that. It's also the higher octave of Mercury because Mercury is literally about what it is that we can, it's our short-term memory, okay? Whereas Uranus, it's all memories. I've talked about this too. That is why it is the higher octave of Mercury. It also archetypally contains all the information about your future. That's why I've talked about if something comes into your consciousness and it's like the Uranian drumbeat, it just keeps coming out of nowhere. It's this idea, it's like this thing that at first it was faint and then it starts getting louder and louder and louder and louder. That is Uranus. It's containing the whispers from your soul and coming into your consciousness in order for you to act, in order for you to make a new choice. And so, why does Uranus archetypally correlate with the Saturnian suppression, all of the memories of the past, this lifetime, other lifetimes, and kind of the blueprint of your future through that Uranian drumbeat? Because all of these dynamics are relating to freedom, breaking free of the past. It's freedom from the known. It is how we individuate. It is how we accelerate our own evolution. And so this is this time period where now, with all of these energies, Mars new phase to the South Node, Venus squaring the nodes, with the resolution being the North Node in Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune, in Aries, conjunct Saturn, repression, um, both retrograde, ruled by that Mars that's conjunct the lunar South Node. And then all of these planets and the lunar South Node ruled by Mercury retrograde. This is like this period of time where all of a sudden, things that we have suppressed are coming up in order for us to create that new action, to heal, right? To reclaim our authenticity and on a soul level, our actual nature, our sense of authority, our personal empowerment, and our creative actualization where we get to co-create with the universe or source or whatever it is that you feel drawn to on an authentic level. It's really helping us to decondition and liberate from the known through accelerating our growth. So there can be these desires that we have suppressed because we were taught that they were wrong or it wasn't good. I know that my first Uranus transit, big one, my Uranus square, I had these desires to really liberate from my family system and what I had known and experienced because I felt that it, if I continued to be who they wanted me to be, I was going to be very, very miserable. So all of a sudden there was a lot of inner friction and suppressed desires around my own individuality, like what I wanted to do in life as a career and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to parent and how I wanted to be a friend and a daughter and a sister and um, a family member in general or a community member. And it was very different than what I had been taught because and through that teaching, I had suppressed how I wanted to show up in the world as a unique individual. And so I really had to make that action. Um, and act on those desires, even though there would be positive and negative consequences, right? But I did it with self-empowerment and self-love because I knew that it was what I was meant to do and what I was supposed to do. So this can be all of a sudden you're recalling these desires that have been suppressed. And now Mars, new phase, lunar south node, you're revisiting some emotional dynamic wrapped around suppressing that from either this lifetime or prior lifetimes or both. And now you're called to make that choice. What feels good for you to act on that? Because some desires, when we get scared of acting on them, especially after they're coming into our consciousness, especially after we've been suppressing them because of our conditioning, that fear, which is a very Aquarian slash Martian Aries energy, can really induce a lot of insecurity. But when we don't act on it, a lot of times the consequence is to continue to feel victimized, launch a failure to launch. It can be all a deepening of anger, of futility, of irritability. I know I experienced a lot of that before I was like, ah, get me out of here. So there's this dynamic, and there's this tension and this friction with Venus square the nodes. But remember, she's also conjunct the north node of Mars and Uranus. So it's really highlighting dual choices, one from the past and one to propel you into the future. Um, Checking your gut and your intuition and going with that. Um, Also, whenever it's pertaining to all of the memories held within the subconscious, this is where a lot of content can be coming up for you that actually helps you gain the Uranian objectivity in order to liberate from past thinking and ways of relating to yourself and others stemming from trauma, Uranus, Aquarius. Um, I know for me personally, all of a sudden I've been connecting a lot of dots about things from my childhood. This is that Cancer Leonian energy that's happening right now. And there are things that I forgot or I actually had denied and suppressed that are now coming back into my consciousness. And I'm now able to gain a lot of clarity. And that has been very, very healing for me. And it's been helping me to change the ways in which I think about things, especially about other people and about myself. And then also, like I said, this can be a lot of information about your future. Now, think about this. Mercury is ruling this Uranus, and it is in Leo, and it is about this self-actualization through the strength of your own will. It's about joy. It's about doing what you feel is right for you, that is rooted in your individuality, and to do it in a way that empowers and gives you a sense of your own unique individuality, right? So this can be a time where that Uranian drumbeat is getting loud and this Mercury retrograde and the Neptune retrograde and the Saturn retrograde is really giving you an opportunity to revisit something from the past that can help propel you into your future. And it's imperative you listen to yourself right now around this. So this is truly, you know, this week is really there's a lot of internalization going on, yet equally there's a lot of externalization through needing to make choices, create action, right? It's about setting into motion something that helps to close up the past. The other thing I want to say is that tomorrow the sun is going to enter Leo, um, and it's the ruler of this Mercury retrograde in Leo. They're both going to be in Leo. So there is this dynamic of really reflecting this need for each one of us to really tap into what is going to give you meaning and purpose in your life, and how are you meant to cultivate this further, and how are you meant to share it with the world, reflecting it to the world. Um, and not only is the sun in Leo and it ruling Mercury retrograde starting tomorrow, but this is also Venus and Mars are going to be squared for the rest of this week. So that is a need to cultivate the action. A square is a very kind of Aries feel. Um, and we've got Mars in there. This action to really purge the past thought processes that have gotten in the way of your own self-empowerment, purpose, meaning, joy, love, expression, creativity, all of that. So pay attention to what is going on inside of you and bet on yourself. Ask for what you need. Take the action to um, to do what it is that your heart is desiring to do right now, because that can really lead to the purging of the past and the healing qualities right now. And it is really needed in the world. So if there's a passion project, anything, just I could go on and on. Um, do it. Bank on yourself. Trust yourself. If you don't trust yourself, but you desire to really do this, the way to cultivate trust in yourself is to do it. And then as you go, you'll learn new ways of improving through that action creating a counteraction, which creates another action for you to take. And on it goes. Virgo, improvement, adjustment. But that can't happen if there's no action. So, this is what is going on this week. I will be uploading a Leo new moon video here in the next day or two. The other thing that I want to say about that is right after that Leo new moon on the 24th happens, it is pulling in that Mars Pluto opposition that, happened on April 26th. It is also, and that is because that new moon is happening within 1 degree of that Mars Pluto opposition, but also, um, the 26th, right after that, and I will get into this with the new moon video, but I do want you guys to have this on your radar. That moon on the 26th is going to be at the anaretic degree of um, of Leo, and that 29-degree Leo moon is going to be conjunct the south node of Mercury. So these themes are really going to be dialed up around taking the action, looking at what it is that's getting in the way, especially within your thought processes pertaining to your own purpose, meaning self-actualization and creativity. Um, and not only is that moon on the 26th going to be conjunct that south node of Mercury, that is happening while the south node of Venus is conjunct the lunar south node in Virgo, while Venus is still squaring the nodes and square to Mars. So it really dials up the intensity of Venus square the nodes, Mars new face the south node, Mercury retrograde, the Leo new moon, and the Mars Pluto opposition. Everything really speaks to healing the past in order to continue to move forward. It's about throwing it off, starting something new, doing it in a way that is empowering. And like I said, I will get into that for your new moon video, but I did want you to have that in your consciousness that it's just really doubled down intensely, even at the end of the week, 2 days after the new moon. So I hope you all have a great Venus square. Look at where it's happening in your chart. As always, you can come see me, book a session if you want to talk about this, you want to understand how this relates to you and your own evolutionary journey or your purpose in life. And I will see you for the new moon and Leo video later this week. All right, have a great week, you guys.